I'm excited to welcome Dr. Nijay Gupta. He's a professor of New Testament at Northern Seminary. He's written several books on the New Testament, including A Beginner's Guide to New Testament Studies and Paul and the Language of Faith. Nijay lives in Portland, Oregon, and enjoys blogging. You'll get to see his blog at patheos.com, blogs Crux Sola, and he speaks at churches in the Pacific Northwest. He is proudly a coffee snob and a foodie. And when he's not reading books, he's probably spending time with his wife, Amy, and their 3 kids, or he's watching soccer. We're really thankful to have him here for our Downey Lectures on October 14th and October 15th at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. These are online, and you can check it out at ambrose.edu, Downey Lectures. The title of his talks are Strange Religion, Why the First Christians Were Weird, Dangerous, and Attractive. In North America today, Christianity is so familiar and widely influential, it's hard to imagine a first century Rome where the earliest followers of Jesus seemed to break a lot of conventions and expectations for religion and respect for the gods. In these lectures, Nijay explores some key aspects of what made those first believers odd, even dangerous to many in society, but also attractive and appealing to some. Is there inspiration in the strange religion that can give us a fresh vision for Christianity today? On Wednesday night, Nijay gave a talk entitled People of Faith, the Early Christians as Believers. On Thursday, Nijay gives a talk on Cult Without Smoke and Blood, the strange worship of the first Christians. These talks are being recorded and made available on our Ambrose website, so you can go check it out there. Now, we're happy to welcome you, Nijay. So can you share with us a little bit about the heart of your talk from Wednesday night?
Yeah, thanks, Beth. It's a pleasure to be here and to be connecting with you this way, even though it would have been fun to be there in person, but glad for the technology and the ability to do it this way. So the heart of the talk, the first talk on strange religion, is this idea that Christians were strange. They marched to a beat of a different drummer. They seemingly broke all the rules of civilized society in the way they did religion. And I don't think it actually seemed intentional. They weren't trying to be weird to be weird. They just started following this Jesus guy, kept following him, and all of a sudden they were outside of what's normal. So I live in Portland, Oregon, and our motto is keep Portland weird. Yeah. And by that, it means shop local, wear whatever clothes you want, express yourself, that kind of thing. And what's interesting today is I feel like a lot of kind of the norm of Christianity is trying to blend in. And I gained so much inspiration from reading the New Testament, from reading the stories of those first churches, that they were actually willing to be offensive, strange, weird, different, but also attractive in the way that they really followed their passion, their heart, their experience they had with Jesus Christ and the Spirit. And I feel like we can learn so much from that, because we can understand, once we read the New Testament that way, what it's like to live in that culture with so many different religions, and for Christianity to pave its own path. I feel like that gives us some fresh vision.
That's wonderful. How does the talk on Wednesday night relate to the one on Thursday night?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first talk is really just kind of putting the pieces together in broad brushstrokes about what made the Christians different. And one of the big pieces of that puzzle is just the fact that they cared so much about what you believe. And in ancient religion, everyone believed in the gods. You didn't really talk about your beliefs in the same way that, we all eat food. We don't really, we talk about food, we talk about preferences, but we don't spend all this time talking about what food actually is. And so it's like that with the Christians. So the second talk is really about worship. I feel like the way we talk about worship now, we end up talking a lot about the how. We don't really talk a lot about the what of worship, what actually is worship. And it's really interesting, if you stepped into the ancient world and you kind of observed what worship is, it almost entirely revolved around sacrifice. And yet you have these Christians, seemingly the only people in the known world to not have material sacrifice. And so the talk really is about, okay, if they don't have that and yet they still worship, how do they think about worship? And what does that mean for us? And what's interesting is they still believed that they offered things to God, but Romans 12 as you know, says, offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. They saw their whole lives as a sacrifice. That opens up all kinds of fascinating issues about what worship is.
That's wonderful. So how did you end up on this topic? Where did this come from?
Yeah, well, it actually started, and this kind of draws from that first lecture. It actually started with people asking me. I wrote a book called Paul and the Language of Faith, and people asked me where the language of believer came from. And so I started to really investigate, okay, what kind of situations did normal Romans and Greeks get into when they talk about believing? And what I realized is they don't use that language at all in a religious capacity. You might say like, oh, I believe the supermarket is over there. You would say that, but you wouldn't actually talk about religious beliefs. So these Christians created this kind of language of saying, I'm a believer. That started me down this road of realizing, okay, why are they talking about this? It's because the things they believed were so weird. Not just monotheism, this idea that there's one God, but also that it's focused on this Jesus person who is a criminal. I mean, the average Roman Greek person, if they knew anything about Jesus, they might know that he was a criminal, right?
Yeah.
And that he came back to life and he lives inside of you. All this is really weird. There's this spirit thing. There's three gods. There's one. It's very confusing. So the Christians had all, and then one of the weirdest things, the world's going to end really soon. And this whole idea of eschatology was brand new, in my view, to the ancient world. Jews had it, but they, the Christians really cranked that up a notch. So this really started with this idea that these Christians were obsessed with what they thought about the world. What they thought about the world was so different than the way that other people think about the world.
So, I mean, I know you write on a variety of topics. So if you were going to describe what your overall goals are as a scholar or as a writer, what would you say, and how do you see this kind of fitting into that?
Sure. Yeah. I write on a lot of different subjects. I do kind of Bible study kinds of things. I do boring commentaries. I do academic articles and textbooks. I feel like the common denominator with a lot of this is I get discouraged when anyone thinks the Bible's not interesting.
Yes.
And I am, the Bible isn't just words on a page. It opens up a whole world of people who had illnesses, had family problems, had aspirations and hopes, had businesses succeed and fail. And so in some ways, the ancient world is very different than us. In some ways, it's very similar to us. The Bible's full of really interesting things. And the New Testament, for me, really captivates me. I know you're interested in the New Testament. You're also interested in the Old Testament. And I think you agree with me that there's a whole lot in there that really connects to real life. All our pains, all our sorrows, all our joys, all our general experiences are captured in the Bible, and it actually has a lot to inform us about how to live well.
So as you're working on it, it sounds to me like one of the things you really care about is making the Bible come to life as something real for people today, not just sort of an ancient document from the past, but one that has, while we look at the ancient pieces, we can see how it has relevance and continuing meaning for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how you feel about this, but sometimes I get people that come up to me and they say, I'm interested in theology. And they're assuming that I'm interested in theology, and I am. But when I hear that, I cringe, because that means they're probably interested in really, really narrow debates, supralapsarianism, or really, really narrow stuff.
All the $10 words.
Yeah, all the big words. And, have you read this scholar? And, I do in-depth reading, but I really like to bring it back home again to how is what I'm learning and reading in the Bible going to affect how I shop at the grocery store, how I drive my car, like real basic stuff, how I raise my family, how I interact with my neighbors. And so, whenever I'm reading the Bible, I just finished, working on Philippians. I'm really interested in what Paul has to say about anxiety and worrying, which he talked about in chapter 4.
Yeah.
He has some really practical things to tell us about how to deal with stress. And we're all going through stress right now.
Absolutely.
So it's super practical. And so those are the bits that really draw me in from Scripture.
I'd be really interested to know more about how you became a New Testament scholar. So is that something that early in your life you were like, yes, I'm going to be a New Testament scholar? Were you the 6-year-old who was like, I'm going to read the Bible every day? Or were you somebody who that came to you progressively over time?
Definitely not the 6-year-old. I actually grew up in a Hindu household. My parents are Hindu, and I, met Jesus when I was a teenager in Northern Ohio. So I became a Christian kind of towards the end of high school, going into college. And I was passionate about ministry. I was passionate about serving the Lord. It's kind of like that thing where when you're in youth group, you want to be a youth pastor. When you're in college, you want to be a college pastor. So I kind of went through all these kind of questions about what I want to do. What I knew is I wanted to study the Bible. I fell in love with the Bible. I took classical Greek in college, and I fell in love with Greek, and I wanted to study the New Testament. So I went to seminary, and then they say you get bit by the bug, which is the teaching bug. Yeah, I got a chance to TA for Greek, and you probably had a similar experience.
You did, yeah.
And I just found that one thing that I knew that I could be good at. There's a lot of things I'm not good at. And, this was something where I loved it. I loved all the nerdy, going to the library, pulling off 30 books. I'm not going to read more than 4 of them, but I'm still going to take them home. I loved just getting into the nitty gritty of the language. I think when people say, why are you a teacher? I love sharing what I'm learning. That's the number one thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm always learning. I always have a stack of books nearby, and I just love, I don't know how you feel, but I sometimes I feel guilty giving the same lecture twice. Like I should be doing a brand new lecture. So I do reuse lectures, but I always love freshening them up, incorporating new things I'm learning. I'm a lifelong learner. So this is all kind of a thing that happened later in life. I wasn't a great student as a younger person. Just to encourage you out there who feel like I'm not really an academic, find the thing you love. And I didn't find that thing until seminary. And then I was like, oh, these are all my people. I didn't realize there's a whole group of people out there just like this.
Yeah, they want to ask all these questions and ask them together. It's very exciting.
Totally. And then I didn't really think I'd be a writer. I knew that I loved teaching, but I started a blog in 2007. And it was just a great way of processing what I'm learning. And then the bonus is other people found it helpful too. So that kind of caught on for me.
Do you see your writing and your teaching flowing into each other in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a weird experience about 10, 15 years ago where I was interviewing for a job. And, the people interviewing me said, we don't care about scholarship. We only want good teachers. So if you came here, you'd have to not do any scholarship. And I didn't get that job, which was okay. But I ended up later on teaching for an institution, Seattle Pacific University, where they really invested in me this idea that scholarship should benefit teaching and teaching should benefit scholarship. And that's worked out for me. I try to introduce what I'm working on to my students. And sometimes if they're undergrad students, maybe just a little bit of what I'm doing. Right. And then I try to test out some of my ideas. Hey, I got these crazy ideas. What do you think? And then vice versa, there was one course where I would work on a chapter. It was a short book. And then I would read it word for word to the students, a chapter. And then they would give me feedback. And then I'd go back and rewrite the chapter. And it was just a one-time experiment. It worked so well because they'd say, oh, I like that part. That part, I don't know if that analogy works. And it was brilliant. It was like they got my day's ideas and I got free feedback right there. Nice. So it was brilliant. So I really do try to marry the two. I mean, you same as me benefit from working at a seminary too, where you're working with the target audience of your books.
Absolutely.
And that's just a gift.
Yeah, you get to hear from them whether that's working or it's not, and what is actually meaningful for other kinds of ministry. And something I really appreciate about you, Nijay, is that you not only write your own material and share that, but you also really work to raise the voices of others. I have benefited from that. You put me in your blog recently for 30 Old Testament and Hebrew Bible scholars to read and follow. Can you share with me more about how that process of raising other voices started, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, this has been a change in my career and something that I have been focusing a lot more in the last 10 years. I'm sure you had somewhat a similar experience since we're kind of in the same career stage, but when we were in seminary, maybe undergraduate as well, what, the field of biblical studies was dominated by white men. And they're like I like to say, there's nothing wrong with white men. I have lots of friends that are white men.
Yeah, I like to say I'm married to one of those, so they're not bad people.
but I was always an outlier. In some of my courses, many of the conferences, I'm the only non-white person. And so it was, in some ways, I was always on the margins. And, people weren't mean, and no one was like name calling or, pushing me to the boundaries, but I never felt like I fit in. And that's, I don't point to someone and say that's your fault, but scholarship is changing now.
Yeah.
And I feel like rapidly. And so there, during the early part of my career, I felt like my skin color, my weird name, these were things to suppress, to do this disembodied thing called scholarship. And over time, I realized, our embodiedness, how we're treated, often, unconsciously, it really affects us.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
it affects the guild, affects society, so I've benefited from my mentors, almost all of them white men, who have lifted my voice, put me in a position now where I can lift others up and help others and come alongside. And I'm really excited to be in that place in life where I can do that. And I can say, okay, who do I want to co-write a book with me? Who would I want to participate in this project? And I'm no longer willing to treat the guild, whether it's biblical studies or anything, as sort of taking a blind, approach to what's going on. I mean, we're still ourselves in all of this.
Yeah.
And I talk to people, women, people of color, men, who do feel marginalized. They feel on the outside.
Yeah.
And any ways that we can take to make sure that people feel like they're really a part of doing well, offering the most they can offer. I'm excited to help people do that, because people have done that for me in the past, and I've really benefited from that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's probably the same reason I do that kind of work as well, because my own experiences, and then wanting to encourage others who've had those experiences, and to say, like, can we actually just make a space at the table for all these different voices? And so I love that. So students might Google you, or anyone else watching this may Google you, and they're going to find a whole lot of books. And a lot of them have come out this year. But I know, you and I both know this just from writing, that books are actually like this journey, especially things like commentaries and other things, that you go from the idea to the publication, and that could be years in the process. Can you talk a little bit about the process for the books that we're seeing coming out this year?
Yeah. Just like what you're saying, books may come out a day apart, or a week apart, or a month apart, but you worked on one for 3 years, you worked on the other for 8 years. And I've had those experiences. So that it's kind of just, these, I remember Craig Blomberg saying, it's kind of like these planes taking off and some are delayed, and, that kind of thing. It's just the way it is. But, I love writing. I think it's probably, of the things I do, it's the thing I love the most. I'm an introvert, so I can hide in my, study and write. It's something I can control. There's so many things in life right now you can't control.
Oh, absolutely.
We've been having forest fires here, and there were several days I couldn't even go outside. And we had to have air purifiers running and all that. And so writing is something I can control. In terms of just output and things like that, I just have all these ideas rolling around in my head. And I always think to myself, has someone else done this already? And if someone else has all done it already, then I'm not going to do it. But if this is a fresh idea, it's got traction, I have these editors, you do too. And I'll just send an email, just say, hey, I had this crazy idea. Are you interested?
Yeah.
And honestly, sometimes they say no. They'll say, no, that's been done. They'll just shoot it down, or they'll say, no, we just published a book like that. But, it's helpful for readers to know, and you experience this too. Sometimes you're invited to do something like a commentary, and sometimes you're excited, but sometimes you just can't say no to certain people.
Yeah.
So some of this is like, okay, I want to do this. I got to find time to do it. This is a person that I really respect. I want to work with them. I want to be a part of their community. Maybe I want to work with them again in the future. So there's some business parts to that.
Absolutely.
But the nice thing about where you're at in your career, where I'm at in my career, is we can start to say, I got some passions I really want to get out, and kind of some space I want to make for a conversation. I'm really excited. Finally, in the last probably 3 to 5 years, I've been able to say, there's some ideas I really want to work on. Actually, the Downey Lecture has given me a chance to do that. I'm really thankful for that, because this is stuff where I'm literally researching it right now. It's just coming out of my head and my keyboard. And I'm finally able to be able to publish books where I can say, I have these ideas I really want to share.
Yeah, that's exciting. It's funny you mentioned the process of wanting to work with somebody. I got a Craig Keener email. He for those who don't know, he's like an amazing Johannine scholar, and he asked me to write on John for a commentary, and I was like, I cannot say no to Craig Keener asking me to write on John for a commentary. That's just going to be a yes. But alongside it, writing on something that you really care about, that's an extension of your unique ways of thinking is another gift that we give. And so that's really cool that you're at that stage. I would love to know what you do for fun. You mentioned soccer, other things that you really love?
Yeah, for sure. So I mentioned I'm a foodie, so I love cooking. I'm the chef of the family. My kids are finally at the place where they're helping out a little bit, but I love making Asian food. So I've been experimenting we just got Instapot for the first time. So I've been making some Indian curry in there. I love Vietnamese food, Thai food. I do a little bit of Chinese food. So, every day I'm in this room here, cooking and, whipping up some stuff. I love a little bit of baking. I got an electric bicycle, which is a really hipster Pacific Northwest thing to do. But
well, you live there, so you've got to be.
That's right. I got to
contextualize.
So I ride my, electric bicycle around some, and, it rains here sometimes. So I can't do it all the time. So that's kind of fun. I love superhero movies. Some people who dared to read some of my books will notice that I have a lot of superhero and sci-fi references. I have
potentially noticed this and appreciated it because of my own love of such things.
Yeah, so sometimes those things will make it into. It's funny, like I read books from, let's say, 100 years ago, and they're quoting like high literature, and I'm quoting like Psych and Doctor Strange, nice. And things like. I try to sneak in Lord of the Rings to look a little mature. But, I'm always coming up with, like, I have some stuff I'm doing with MacGyver, illustrations and, nice. Things from my childhood. Yeah. So I like to tell my students, I watch TV for the illustrations.
Oh, of course. That's the only reason.
And they appreciate that. Although I realized after teaching for several years that the students, they're getting younger and younger because I'm getting older and older. They don't get my illustrations because they don't watch the same TV show.
Yeah, it's funny. I made a Avengers Leviathan reference. Like, Leviathan, it's kind of like Thor. My students were just looking at me like, okay, Beth, good for you. That's wonderful. Nijay, it has been so good having a conversation with you. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And if you had one more thing that you felt like, this is something that I'd like people to know, either about your work or about the New Testament, what's something else that you would just want to say, this is a really important thing for people to realize?
Yeah, well, this is just in terms of Bible reading, because I used to teach undergraduate students, I teach graduate students, and one of the challenges of reading the Bible is that we're just so familiar with it. We think 2 steps in advance what the text is going to say, because we already know what it says from Sunday school or whatever. So I remember one of my professors, Stephen Barton, I was observing him teaching a course of undergraduate students, and he told the students, read the Bible in such a way that it surprises you. And that's stuck with me 10 years later because, I love Harry Potter movies, and my son's reading through Harry Potter right now, and we watch it every Christmas. And the whole movie series, and I love to try to find something I haven't seen before. Like maybe it's a piece of dialogue or foreshadowing or something I haven't seen before. And so if you're on the lookout for that, you will find it.
Yeah.
But if you're
Yeah.
passively reading, just like getting the quiet time over, or just reading for class, it's not going to surprise you. But if you go into it wanting it to surprise you, I think it will. So that's my little bit of advice.
That's wonderful. Well, I know that your talk will definitely bring us into a new space of looking at the New Testament and thinking about what does it mean to be a Christian and being surprised by that. So I think that'll be an awesome thing for the people we have coming. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And I know that that's going to benefit so many people. So thanks, Nijay.
My pleasure.